Hello everyone, my name is Naguura, and today I'm going to be talking about the new upgrade system, what you should be using your crests on, and what you maybe shouldn't use your crests on, and just generally explaining some tips and tricks on how you best use the upgrading system, especially since it's new and people maybe don't know all of the details about it. So first of all, if you don't know exactly how the upgrading system works, make sure you are checking out the video that I uploaded on my YouTube channel, because otherwise you're not really going to understand the tricks and tips that I'm talking about in this video. So let's talk about free upgrades. This is going to be really important for you to understand, so you know when you should be saving your crests. Alright, so the way free upgrades work is basically every upgrade is going to cost you flight stones, and every upgrade technically also costs you crests, right? So you need worm crests, drake crests, whelpling crests, or aspect crests to do any sort of upgrade, unless you actually have an item in that same slot on a higher item level. So for example, if I loot a belt that is item level 441, then I will be able to upgrade any other belt that is lower than 441 to that item level without having to use any crests. You're only gonna have to use flight stones at that point. Now this is important to understand because crests are the limited resource. You can only have 10 crests of each that you can farm, right? So they're limited, while flight stones are not limited. And therefore, if you can ever do an upgrade without having to use crests, then you should be doing that. Now, these free upgrades are important because, for example, if I do, let's say, a plus 15 key and I get a certain belt that is best in slot for me, then I would think, oh, I should upgrade this belt because it's best in slot. I'm never going to get a better belt. At that point, you would think, oh, let's just upgrade it. But it's possible that you do a plus 19 key later and you get a different belt that is not best in slot, but it's higher item level. Now, if you have this higher item level belt, then you can upgrade your best in slot belt that is lower without having to use crests, right? A bunch of details about the free upgrades is that for rings and trinkets, you need 2 before you can upgrade it for free. So if I only have one 441 ring and all my other rings are lower item level, like 420, then I won't be able to upgrade them for free. If I have 2 441 rings, then I will be able to upgrade any lower item level ring to 441 without spending crests. This also works, like if I have one 441 ring and one 437 ring, then I would be able to upgrade any ring that is below 437 to 437. And then I would have to pay crests again to 441, right? And the same goes for trinkets as well. Now, for weapons, if you have a 2-hand weapon on 441, you will be able to upgrade a 1-hand and an offhand to 441 without paying crests. But it does not work the other way around. So if I have a 1-hand weapon that is 441, then I will not be able to upgrade like an offhand to 441 for free. Same goes if I have an offhand versus a main hand, right? Then main stat doesn't matter. So that means if I have an agility belt that is 441, I will be able to upgrade a lower item level belt with intellect to that level. And now, of course, belt was a bad example, but you know what I mean, like for weapons and trinkets and so on. Right, then armor type does matter. So that means if I have a 441, let's say, plate belt, I wouldn't be able to upgrade a leather belt that is lower without paying crests. Then, some of this discount is account-wide, but not the crest discount. So if I have a higher item level item in a slot, as I said, you will be able to upgrade a lower one without paying crests, and you also need to spend less flight stones than you would otherwise. So it's cheaper on the flight stones. And that is account-wide. So if I have an alt and my main has much higher item level in every slot, then I will be able to upgrade things for less flight stones. You still have to pay the crests though, because it's only character-wide for the crest discount. PvP items also do not count for the discount because the PvP items are a separate upgrading track. They're not on this system at all, right? So if I have a 441 PvP item, it will not make the upgrading free. Alright, so now that I explained this system, let's talk about which crests are the most important ones. And in my opinion, the Drake and the Worm crests are the most important. Because if you look at the system of this graphic, you will see that Whelpling crests will upgrade your items to a maximum of 411, which is pretty low item level for Season 2. Because if you do LFR, if you do Mythic Plus 1 to 5, you will get those items, right? Which is, for most players, I would say it's not necessarily something that is going to be super valuable to you. And that's why, in my opinion, if you have anything that you can upgrade with Whelpling Crest that will be an upgrade for you, then you should just do it. I don't think you should think about Whelpling Crests too much. Just use them. The only thing that you might want to consider with the Whelpling Crest is that you maybe get a tier item from LFR that maybe completes your set. So maybe you get 2 set or 4 set with 1 item from LFR, and then you would need Whelpling Crests to upgrade that certain item, which is something to consider, but you don't have to worry about it too much. Alright, then talking about Drake Crests, I do think that Drake Crests are a little bit more important than Whelpling, but also not that important depending on what you do. If you're a Heroic Raider or a Mythic Raider, then you probably don't need that many Drake Crests, because it only upgrades to 424 maximum, which is not something that a Mythic Raider or a Heroic Raider necessarily needs that much of. But you should still consider that if you get a tier from a normal mod raid, then you're gonna need Drake Crest to upgrade this tier piece to a higher item level, so keep that in mind. But other than that, Drake Crests are also something you can kind of use without thinking about them too much. Now, Worm Crests are probably the most important crests for most players. For Heroic Raiders and for Mythic Raiders especially. If you do M plus 16 or higher, you're gonna need a lot of Worm Crests. The reason why is because Worm Crests are needed for Hero Track and for Champion 5 to 8, which are basically any items from plus 10 or plus 9 onwards actually. Because as soon as you do a plus 9 key, you get 415 items, which are Champion 1 out of 8, and those items from a plus 9, you need 3 Drake Crests to upgrade, and then you need 4 Worm Crests to upgrade them all the way. If you do plus 19 keys, which is the maximum item level you can get from End of Dungeon chest, you would get 431 item level, which is Hero to the 5, which means that you would need 2 Worm Crests to upgrade it, plus 1 Aspect Crest to upgrade it all the way to 441. So Worm Crests are definitely something you're going to need a lot of, especially at the start of the patch when you're not going to be able to do like full plus 20 keys all of the time. You're gonna need a decent amount of Drake Crests depending on your key range. So as I said, plus 9 keys drop 415. If you do plus 19, which is the highest end of dungeon loot, it would be 431. So you're definitely gonna need a decent amount of Drake Crests, but also a lot of Worm Crests to upgrade everything. Now Aspect Crests are the highest crests actually, but they're not actually used as much. So this is probably something that is going to confuse the most people, because they think, oh, Aspect Crests are the best crests, and therefore they're going to be the most valuable, right? But the reason why that is not true is because Aspect can only be used for one single upgrade, and that is a hero item from 4 out of 5 to 5 out of 5. And hero items, of course, you will get a lot of them if you do high keys in a plus, if you do plus 17 or higher. So if you do plus 17 or higher, you will get hero items. And yes, then you will need Aspect Crests to upgrade them, but you also need Worm Crests, right? For each upgrade. So if I have a hero 1 out of 5 item from a plus 17, then I need 3 Worm Crests to upgrade it to 437, and then 1 Aspect Crest to 5 out of 5. So yeah, the difference between Worm and Aspect is just that Aspect cannot be used as much, while Worm Crest can be used a lot. Then one more thing I should mention though is that Aspect Crests are actually used for crafted items. So if you want to craft the maximum item level crafted items with your sparks, you will need 4 Aspect Crests to upgrade them. Now this is important to note, because if you're like wasting your Aspect Crest and like turning Aspect Crest into Worm Crests, which is something I'll talk about later, then you might not be able to craft your highest item level crafted item anymore, because you need 4 Aspect Crests for that. So keep that in mind for sure. But of course the sparks that we have are limited, so there's not going to be that many items you can craft on max item level, and therefore you're not going to need that many enchanted Aspect Crests. But yeah, so going back to the downgrading system, so you can downgrade any crest to the lower tier. So if I have 10 Aspect Crest, I could technically downgrade those 10 Aspect into 10 Worm, which counts like additionally to the 10 maximum. I already explained this in the upgrading system, but the maximum that you can farm per week is always related to fragments, right? You can only farm a total of 150 fragments for each crest type, and those 150 fragments turn into 10 crests. But if you get crests, like a full crest, then it does not count towards the fragment cap, because they never were fragments, right? So if I have 150 fragments earned the first week of like the Drake ones, I could still end up having 11 Drake crests if I got one Drake crest from some other source. That's why if you have 10 worm crests, you would be able to get additional worm crests by downgrading aspect crests. Now, this is decently important, I would say, because as I said, worm crests are probably going to be a lot more important early on compared to aspect crests, and therefore I do think that you can consider downgrading certain aspect crests to worm, but just keep in mind that you still need aspect crests for the crafted items. So 4 aspect crests per crafted max item level item, which you do need a spark for. So since we only have 1 spark the first week, you only need 1. And then the second week of the raid, we're gonna have a second spark, so you will need 4 again. And then of course you also want to keep in mind that you still need aspect crests to upgrade a hero item to 5 out of 5, but only ever 1. You will always need more worm crests than aspect crests, but you still need aspect crests. Like, they're not useless, right? So definitely think about that. Alright, so conclusion, use your Whelpling crest on whatever you want. Drake crests, depending on what kind of content you do. If you're a mythic raider, you probably don't worry about Drake crests too much, but keep in mind you might need them for tier upgrades, like normal tier. Then worm crests, probably the most important crests, so definitely think about what you're using them for, and don't waste them, as I talked about the free upgrade system earlier. So any sort of item that is best in slots from a plus, from like a lower key range, from like a plus 10 or a plus 15 or whatever, instead of immediately upgrading that item, think about the fact that, oh, maybe later I'm gonna do a hierarchy and I might get an item in the same slot. Even if it doesn't have to be the same item, it just has to be the same slot, right? And then I wouldn't have to spend the crests anymore. Then I would only have to spend the flight stones. So just keep that in mind whenever you think about upgrading, no matter which crest it is, right? Because sometimes holding on to crests is more important if you don't need an immediate upgrade. Of course, if you loot an item and you sit in plus, you loot an item and you're immediately starting your raid afterwards and you're progressing a boss or whatever, then it's like maybe you can just use the upgrade right there. But like, you shouldn't be holding on to items for weeks and weeks just because maybe in the future you get like a better item and then you don't need, But just, logically think about the fact that if you're playing in plus all day and you're gonna do like a little bit of a higher key range later on in the day, then maybe don't immediately spend your crests on an item that you might be able to upgrade for free later on. For free. Of course, you always have to pay flight stones, but you know what I mean. All right. So that's it about my tips and tricks that I have when it comes to the upgrading system. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but I think it's a lot more intuitive once we actually have the season start and people can figure out the system. But yeah, just wanted to give you those tips and tricks to make sure you're not quote-unquote wasting your crests. And yeah, hope this helped you out. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And if you have any questions, ask in the comments below or come over to my stream at twitch.tv/Naguura, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!